Throughout the years, and especially over the last 15 years or so, you've been told by the regime media, by various NPCs in the academia, by various all sorts of experts whose authority is illegitimate and you should routinely question anyway. You've been told that carrying cash, physical cash, makes you a criminal, that you should be ashamed for having large amounts of cash. And it is indeed better and civilized to surrender your financial privacy to various private state-controlled corporations known as banks, who then will settle the payments for you with the trade-off of the regime knowing every single financial move that you make. And naturally, there has been some backlash to that, in some countries larger and in some countries not so large. Among the large backlash countries, I would count here, Germany or Japan, and countries with zero backlash, I would count here, Sweden, for instance. And most of that backlash was around the notion of control. But what if it's not just control? And in fact, what if control is just a happy byproduct, but the main impetus for it is the bank lobbying? Let's explore. Hello everyone, and welcome to the third season of the Propaganda's Basement, and the first episode of this third season. I think it's the 43rd in total, although I might be mistaken about that. As always, the Propaganda's Basement is with mostly original exemplars of propaganda that we dissect, and at least 4 or 5 episodes per season are in English. This season, the first 2, and then who knows how many others sometime down the line. So, I was mentioning in some other video, I think it was last year, when I said that it is not the state, it is the private corporations that are really eager to get you to make as many digital payments as possible and as few payments that are not digital as possible, because when you spend digital money you tend to spend more, which is very great for private service providers and private corporations because they get more of your money. Now, the interest of the state in that, of course, it's control, but it is just one of the happy trade-offs for the state. It is not really the state that is so happy about that, especially given that the state also has to pay bank fees as well. So in fact, even for the state, it's not a particularly great deal, but since it gets control in return for it, most governments tend to think that this is a great idea. So, for most of the time when anti-cash propaganda has been around, most of the time this was framed either in medievalist conservatism from the population side. This is how it's framed in Germany, especially since Germans are really not big fans of electronic payments. So Germans are consistently framed as a very weird people with weird habits that need to be broken down, because they're really just backward people who don't want to embrace the wonders of digital QR codization and control. Or it is framed by those who oppose such measures, is framed as globalist desire for control and whatnot, which sometimes it's true, but oftentimes it's not. Most of the time it is actually the banks who are really happy to push for such measures. And that's how this episode was born, because I was very surprised to find this latter argument, that it's really just the banks who really love this shit, in the place that I expected it the least, namely in an issue of Komsomolskaya Pravda. I had no idea that Komsomolskaya Pravda still exists, especially not the Komsomolskaya Pravda outside of Russia. But there you go. it still exists, and not only it still exists, but it's also very fun to go through. Most of the times it's just a basic bitch tabloid, but nevertheless it has the obligatory hammer and sickle there. And as you can see, it appears since 1925, so it claims the tradition, the Komi era tradition, and this is the issue for the week August the 30th to September the 6th, 2023. So yeah, Komsomolskaya Pravda, yeah, we'll mock this part in another episode when we'll get to that. The chance to be correctly informed, now also news in the state language, in our newspaper KP in Moldova. So yeah, the state language is basically the running joke at this point for the commies who refuse to acknowledge that the Romanian language is a thing in Moldova. In any event, so this is a newspaper mostly in Russian, with a few exceptions here and there. There are a few pages in it that are not in Russian. So there you go, this one is not in Russian. But, you know, that's basically their idea of being a fair newspaper for the state language. We're just going to have one or two pages that are not in Russian, so there you go. Now we have included the language of the overwhelming majority as well. In any event, so Komsomolskaya Pravda, the first page here. В Молдове запретят наличные деньги. Will Moldova ban cash payments or cash money or physical money? And it is a very compelling article, quite frankly, and I guess the best way to go about it is to just read it to you. Oh goodness me, translating from Russian into English at the same time. So yeah, the Ministry of Finance has come up with new rules concerning cash payments. What should those who buy a car or an apartment be mindful of or be wary of? The experts believe that this is a lobby in favor of banks, but not in favor of a state in economic decline or in favor of ordinary citizens of the country. And this is the part that was quite shocking to me, because it's usually experts show up to, in fact, uphold such measures, because usually the experts are paid by the exact same big corporations and big banks, and of course it is in their financial interest to uphold such measures, because they get a bonus for it if those corporations they work for get better financial results. And the way for those corporations to get financial results is to get as many people as possible compelled to use digital payments, because statistically they will pay more if they are compelled in such a situation. So there's that. But not this time, And initially I was going to ignore this article because, well, I was like, okay, probably just basic bitch Russian propaganda, but it's not. So that was surprising. So in any event, Komsomolskaya Pravda. The Ministry of Finance has come up with new rules for cash payments. The corresponding bill has been published on particip.gov.md. And the department now accepts comments and suggestions on the document until August the 28th. So, which is also interesting. This is the newspaper for August the 30th. So, in fact, it gets published in the newspaper after you get after the legal term. The legal period for objections. At the same time, the professional accounting company Contabil News has already criticized the project, and over 1,500 people have signed a petition demanding that it be reviewed. As follows from the explanatory note: the bill on cash payments is aimed at creating a regulatory framework concerning the rules for conducting cash payments and providing for the possibility of implementing effective and proportionate measures to reduce the risk of committing offenses, financial offenses, effectively. According to the authors of the project, this will have a positive impact on economic development, of course, the powers that be get more money, and will ensure increased transparency and security, bullshit, by expanding the capabilities of monitoring and combating tax evasion, there you go, and combating the negative factor of unfair competition. Yes, of course. That's basically, especially in Moldova, the government is really concerned about unfair competition. Give me a freaking break. In any event, the bill concerns mainly legal entities, that will be corporations, individuals conducting independent activities, so judicial persons essentially, as well as individuals buying an apartment or a car, an automobile. Here are the main provisions. The designated persons are required to hand over their payment service operators all excess cash in excess of the minimum requirements for settlements within the next 3 business days, with some exceptions. Unlimited cash payments are permissible in the following cases: wages and other payments arising from the employment relationship, fulfillment of obligations to banks. There you go. So banks get a special exemption. The state, I suppose, also gets a... Yeah, there you go. Settlements of payments with government agencies and authorities. So, it's okay if you have to pay theft, otherwise known as taxation, to the government. That can be paid unlimited in cash. But heaven forbid you buy $1 million home in cash. So, that is not permitted. There you go. There you go. What else? Pledges and guarantees and other payments in criminal cases in favor of government agencies and authorities. So then again, if you lose a criminal case and you have to pay, or a court case, and you have to pay reparations to a private person, and you have to pay, I don't know, 500,000 euros, you cannot pay that in cash. But if you lose against the state, then the state will gladly take your pile of cash. What else? Repayment of tax obligations, payments, and fines to the state budget of the country. Again, fines being taxation for things that the state thinks are wrong, so that'll be things that are legal for a price. What else? Issuing the cash from the organization's cash desk is permissible under certain conditions, and sanctions are provided for non-compliance. What else? Commissions charged for non-cash payments have been reduced. For example, for transactions between individuals, they cannot exceed 0.1% of the transaction amount carried out by bank transfer, including when withdrawing cash. Let us note that the maximum amount in which cash payments are allowed should not exceed 100,000 lei, that will be Moldovan lei, per month or per year, depending on with whom and in what area the payments are made. I suppose in what economic area they mean. And in the case of the purchase of real estate or a vehicle, the limit being 300,000 lei. In return, the Contabil News Group called the bill harmful and restrictive of business practices. True. The accounting community gave a negative opinion on the draft law on cash payments. In particular, they noted that some articles in the law relating to cash payments were in fact taken again from a law that had been repealed in 2021. In addition, they believe that the new restrictions on cash are a result of a lobby from the banks, in favor of the banks, but not in favor of the state, which is in economic decline, and the cash limit has not been revised for 20 years. Another remark concerns the exorbitant fees for completely minor violations, which establishes a total dictatorship over the economy. In particular, fines can range from 500 to 5,000 lei, or a certain percentage of the amount exceeding the established maximum. Right, so that was interesting. It was very interesting to see a Russian paper of all places, admittedly a Russian paper printed outside of Russia, but nevertheless a Russian paper, writing something like this, because it is true. Most of the time, more often than not, such insanity is pushed by the banks. Now, of course, there is some benefits for the state too. Otherwise, the state would not promulgate these kinds of regulations. But nevertheless, the initiative is almost always from the banks. because the banks get to make a cut of every single transaction, and all they have to do in return is to make the ledger available from time to time to the state whenever the state feels like it. So it is a symbiotic relationship between these two entities, the big banks and the state, and it's a very productive partnership to the detriment of regular people, and yes, to the state finances as well. But it's not like the politicians care that much about the finances of the government, because if they had cared that much, then most of the countries would not be in those huge deficits that they find themselves in. So there's that. But why is a Russian paper publishing something like this? Because oftentimes when a propaganda paper, and let's not forget, Komsomolskaya Pravda is a propaganda newspaper. So why is Komsomolskaya Pravda publishing something like this? Which again, it's true. I mean, 100% of what they write in their article is true. But why do they publish the truth? What's the impetus there? Well, it's very simple. Their masters in the Kremlin are a bit outside of the banking system these days. They themselves are under sanctions, so it's not like they can conduct their financial operations. Now, of course, they can't conduct them in cash either, but they can conduct it via other third-party tools such as cryptocurrencies or the Chinese banking system. But still, if they want to bring that money back into the regular global banking system, they would still have to leave a paper trail, which now they don't necessarily have to leave, but they would if such restrictive practices would be around. So from their perspective, that's a problem. Now, of course, it's not an insurmountable problem, but that's the part that you will not hear about, because, of course, once you mention these things, then, of course, the usual suspects, the usual NPCs will show up and say, see, this is why we need to have more control and surrender more control to the state, because otherwise your mother is Putin. Now, of course, nobody wants to tell those people that, look, if you want to work around financial sanctions, there's always a way, and especially there's a way if you are a gas station, which is exactly what Russia is. Now, of course, those ways may not be comfortable, may not be easy, but it's doable if you want to. The only people who lose from this are, of course, regular people, small business owners, and people who conduct independent activities. Those are the only people that actually lose. The wealthy people, no, of course, they don't lose. In fact, the best tax evasion done these days is not done via cash. It's also done via fiat, non-cash payments methods, something like that. I don't remember the term in English. Mijloace de plată fără numerar is the legal term in Romania and Moldova. But yeah, so of course, Komsomolskaya Pravda cannot say that look, it would be quite inconvenient for our friends in the Kremlin. So instead, they identified correctly that how about telling the truth? Telling the truth in this particular case is in fact advantageous for Russian propaganda. So yeah, that's the lesson of the first episode. Sometimes the truth can in itself be propaganda. That's why we keep on insisting here on the sofa that propaganda is not something inherently bad, it's not something inherently good. Propaganda is what it is. We have to learn to recognize it, we study it in order to then use it for our purposes as well. So yeah, next time around, pay more attention to who is pushing for further restrictions on cash, because more often than not, those who push for those restrictions are not your friend, and they're trying to use your weaknesses against you, whether your weakness is convenience or, your activities, or in the case of Moldova, their precarious geopolitical position. But everyone has a weakness, and those who want more money from you usually will try to exploit it against you. So yeah, all of that being said, thank you all for watching, and see you all soon. Cheers!